Hi there, welcome to episode 52 of Paranormal Blip. And thank you ever so much to the guys from The Rest is Politics, one of the biggest podcasts in the United Kingdom, Alistair Campbell and Rory Stewart, who talk politics. And it's a very good show. They know their business. And for weeks and weeks, because I heard a long time ago that Tony Blair had an edition of this book about Rendlesham on his bookshelf in number 10, Downing Street. And the book is called Left at Eastgate, and it's about the Rendlesham case. And so for weeks and weeks, I've been asking via their kind of Rest is Politics Twitter feed the question, is this true? Did Tony have the book on his shelf? And this week in the Rest of Politics, they answered my question. So thank you very much. They literally get thousands of questions a week, those guys. I feel very honored that you selected me and you spent 90 seconds talking about UFOs. I don't mind that you kind of laughing, whatever. I kind of expect that, don't I? Yeah. But Rory did talk about Ryan Graves very briefly because there was a Telegraph article about Ryan. And Alistair Campbell, said the question was from Paranormal Blip, so it was very exciting to hear. And Rory then retweeted my thanks. So thank you, Rory. Now, Rory, I don't know if you're listening, you're probably not, but if you are listening and you're a fan of The Rest of His Politics and you know Rory, please get this to him because it's very important. A couple of weeks ago, as you probably remember, he talked about this book called A Prince of Disorder, which is by this guy called John Mack, okay? And it's a Pulitzer Prize-winning biography of T.E. Lawrence of Arabia. And John Mack is fiercely connected to the UFO paranormal scene. He went on to become a major researcher in UFOs. This was in the 90s when he was working for Harvard, and Harvard actually tried to kick him out, and they didn't succeed in kicking him out. So it's quite interesting, coincidence that this book that Rory loves is actually written by somebody that then years and years after writing that book about Lawrence of Arabia went on to become a very notable UAP or UFO researcher. So if you're along for the ride because you listen to The Rest is Politics, jump into the archive, follow me on Twitter at Paranormal Blip. If you're interested in fascinating cases and brilliant interviews and fun reviews, then you're at the right place. Now, I'm now going to talk to my audience. Thank you very much, The Rest of Politics. That's the part that. Now, listen, guys. Just doing a quick one tonight because it's off the back of the news that on Wednesday we have got a treat lined up. 3 hours, according to Gary Nolan, Dr. Nolan. 3 hours of Senator Gillibrand and various other senators quizzing Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick about AARO and where they are with AARO. Okay, so this episode is going to be all about what do we expect on that. Okay, it's going to be a bit of a short one, but I'm going to look into what can we expect. But first of all, it wouldn't be Paranormal Blip if we didn't say hello to the Blomps.
The question you read out came from somebody who goes by the name of Paranormal Blip.
Sean Kirkpatrick sits down and is quizzed for 3 hours. Now, what can we expect? Well, I don't think that he's going to say anything that is going to get him in trouble with his superiors. I don't think he's going to say anything that is going to be much of a surprise, really. It looks like I just watched this fantastic interview with Gary Nolan that I'll link. Matt Ford did a brilliant job interviewing Gary. Great questions. Matt Ford does the Good Trouble show. It's definitely worth watching. And Gary was basically saying, it's going to be a bit of a kind of, it's going to be a show, but it's not going to reveal much. And well, you can kind of expect that, can't you? I mean, thinking about it, in that forum, we've kind of known the way that these things go. You get little snippets, little nuggets, and not much else. But Mr. Nolan, Dr. Nolan, thank you, was saying that what will be clear is that the senators have been, doing their homework and they're prepared, and so kind of watch out for their questions. Now, this is an open session, 3 hours long, apparently, according to Dr. Nolan, and then there'll be a closed session where they can kind of probably get more answers from Sean Kirkpatrick. But the interesting thing here is that, well, number one, it's happening at all, yeah, and I mean it's kind of extraordinary like the difference with where the United States is at and where Britain is at, as an example, okay, and that they've got writing in law which protects people coming forward with information, and those people have been coming forward with information. And in that interview with Matt Ford today, Gary Nolan said basically they're talking about crashed craft and contact, which is extraordinary. And oh, by the way, tomorrow, or certainly over the weekend, I'm going to be doing a kind of free flow, freestyle, kind of where I'm at in terms of consciousness, in terms of everything that I think is going on. I'm not connected to anyone. So I don't know anything, well, you know me, you listen to this, I don't know a damn thing. But I do have my theories, and occasionally I kind of like, you probably know a bit if you listen. Well, what I'm thinking of, but I thought it'd probably be a good time to have a bit of a kind of roundup of like where I'm at with all of this. So we'll be talking about consciousness. We'll be talking about connections between, kind of poltergeist activity and UAP and contact and near-death experiences. And I'll try to articulate as best I can my thoughts around that. This is for the subscribers. This is for the subscribers with my like 4 every month deal. Yeah. So I owe the subscribers one this week, right? So that's the idea for the subscribers. Yeah. So subscribe if you want to listen to that. Anyway, but totally connected to that is this idea of, what do the senators already know? Okay, because those are the guys that are being approached by the what some people would call whistleblowers. I've got a very loud chair there. It's not a poltergeist. It's just a loud chair. At least people who have, credible, kind of validated, anomalous experiences, who talk to the senators and the Congress people, the guys that are kind of pushing this forward, and so now that, and we know that some people like Robert Salas has kind of publicly said that he's spoken to AARO, but also they're talking to the whistleblowers, and not sure about Mr. Salas himself, but certainly others have spoken to um, the senators as well and the Congress people as well, and that this idea that there's a kind of there's a general, like J. Christopher King was just talking about it today, and Joe Merger and loads of people are basically saying the same thing. There's this general expectation that in this year, and Gary Nolan was saying something very similar, this year, next 6 months, basically, you're going to get to the point where somebody says something which changes the paradigm, okay? Which is extraordinary to think that. Now, so what I want to talk to you about is what would that involve, okay? Because for quite a long time now, in my kind of making of this show, I've spoken to people, and I know you know this if you listen, but one to one, people are very keen to tell me about their paranormal, anomalous experiences. Okay, but they also are not keen for me to tell you. So the and I totally get that. I mean, it's not necessarily even a stigma, but it's just that. Well, I guess it is like a kind of overarching kind of cultural stigma. Um, but at the same time, of course, people are private, and these are private, often very intimate moments in their lives. When people that they love die, when people are kind of close to death, that kind of thing. Even if it isn't connected to dying or death, certainly if you have a kind of anomalous experience, and you don't go around telling people, then of course, they trust me. And the thing about being a researcher, if I can call myself a researcher, is it's a bit like being a trainee chef. You don't burn your sauces. That's good that joke, isn't it? Yeah, don't burn your sauces. So of course, like everybody that tells me anything is like totally, I'm not going to burn my sauces, am I? Having said that, it kind of sets up this thing in my mind about, well, what is the kind of relationship that people have with this material, or this kind of phenomena? Because on one hand, people seem to be like, I mean, obviously it's they know me and they know that they can trust me, and I'm not anyone. But at the same time, I'm not their brother. Like I'm not like a major force in their lives. Um, so there's a kind of willingness to kind of share something intriguing and mysterious and interesting, like a kind of campfire type stuff. Like a kind of everyone's got a story that nobody would believe type thing. There's that aspect to it, to kind of like this is a good story. Like the Paul Auster thing. Um, Stories only happen to people that can tell them, as he said. Yeah. And at the same time, though, so you've got this kind of this desire to share, and at the same time, though, you also have this desire for anonymity and a kind of sense of not being too certain about putting yourself out there. Yeah, and I totally get that. Okay, now how do you transpose that onto then a kind of wider situation whereby something might come out in the press or be revealed in a kind of an open hearing in Congress or whatever? um like, how does society take that? Okay, now Dr. Nolan would say, well, as long as it doesn't physically, like, actually affect people's day-to-day lives, they'll get on with it. They'll get on with life. And of course he's right in that way. um, and I think that there wouldn't be much of a surprise for many people, because the experiences that people have had is overwhelmingly, like the overwhelming in number. Everybody I know has had something happen to somebody that they trust, if not themselves. Someone that they do trust and do know, their parents or a sibling or somebody that they've known all their lives, or themselves. So it wouldn't be that surprising for, like, on an individual basis, for people to, um, kind of, like, what's the word? Like, take in that information and find a way of being okay with that information. Yeah, yeah. And of course, though, at the same time, though, if there is something that is kind of paradigm shifting that happens, then it's very difficult to predict the societal consequences of that. You know, like what would happen to, um, the stock market, for instance? What would happen to people? Like, how would people feel the next day in terms of, uh, you know, like what they think about life, what they think about, if as an example, and I'll get into this more tomorrow, but as an example, if we had like concrete evidence that we were being visited by, beings like non-human intelligences, and non-human intelligences are kind of living among us, undetectable to us, yeah, and there's lots and lots of reports of that. We know, um, James Iandoli has got this thing at the moment where a couple of months ago he posted different interviews with people talking about this thing. The number one, is Michael Masters talks about the number one kind of type of non-human intelligence that's detected by people or kind of observed by people are people that essentially look humans, non-humans that look exactly human, you know. So if we had rock solid, like, total, like, verifiable, incontrovertible proof that we have a kind of, what would the word be? A species, a non-human species, among us, living among us, like, how would that affect the world? Okay, because of course, even for me, that's terrifying. Even for me, it is like, oh, I mean, that's like a horror movie, isn't it? But I think that is there here, isn't that there here? I haven't seen there here, but can you hear my voice? It's a bit gravelly, isn't it? Yeah. But anyway, I think that might be the plot to There Here. Starring Rowdy Roddy Piper. Is that a John Carpenter film, I think, isn't it? Yeah. Maybe I should review that here. But anyway, the idea, so I can see how on a kind of like individual thing, you think, oh well, I remember when my gran said that, her mum, kind of came to her in a dream and then she woke up and found out that the mum was dead or whatever. Oh, and therefore I'm not entirely surprised that there are non-human intelligences that look exactly like humans walking among us, and yet at the same time, from a kind of societal level, you can see that that would be like a major upset, obviously a major upset, yeah? Now, like I said, I don't know anything. This is just one of various kind of theories or strands out there that I decided to kind of like talk about. Having said that, though, Kirkpatrick, so he wrote this thing a couple of, I think it was last month, yeah, with your man Avi Loeb from Harvard, and one of the things they said, just like as a possibility, is that there might be an alien mothership in our solar system. Okay, so and this made news all around the world. I mean, this was like a big news thing, like all the big ones, MSNBC, blah blah blah. Yeah, all of the kind of cable news channels in the States, lots of tabloids, and the tabloid that has probably got the best coverage, kind of overall continual coverage, is the Mail in the UK, which is a paper that I've got big problems with politically. But they do have this reporter, Josh Boswell, and Josh also works quite a lot with Christopher Sharp. Okay, and we know Christopher Sharp from Liberation Times, and so they've been working together a lot recently. And the Josh Boswell story, where Christopher Sharp wasn't part of this, but the Josh Boswell write up of the kind of mothership idea is really interesting. Okay, because what it does is he's got the ability to to get kind of interviews with kind of key people. So he got an exclusive interview with Avi Loeb, yeah, and he also got an interview with Dr. Travis Taylor. So Travis Taylor, he used to be the chief scientist for the task force, the UFO task force, yeah. Essentially, there's this kind of rift because in this paper that Kirkpatrick and Loeb wrote, they basically said that you have to kind of adhere to the kind of rules of science, if you like, yeah. So as an example, he says this paper here, which I'll put a link on, physical constraints on unidentified aerial phenomena. They argue it's impossible for an object to travel faster than the speed of sound in Earth's atmosphere without creating a sonic boom, and the very fast-moving objects always create a fireball or a fiery tail in the air as friction with air molecules cause them to burn up. And then Loeb, speaking to Josh, says, if you're seeing UFOs, it means they interact with light. It means they interact with electric and magnetic fields because that's what light is. And it means they must interact with the atoms and molecules of air because air molecules interact with the electric and magnetic forces. And then Josh goes on to say, Kirkpatrick and Loeb's stances are at odds with the famous descriptions given by some Navy pilots of tic-tac-shaped objects, zipping 40 miles in less than a minute, at least 3 times the speed of sound with no sonic boom or fiery tail. Basically, so the idea that Kirkpatrick and Loeb is saying in this paper is that, you can't defy the rules of science, okay? And then Travis Taylor comes back saying, is so uncreative and typical of a Harvard physicist. That's so ridiculous. 2 equations does not a science paper make. Clearly, he has not read Chris van der Broek's paper or another paper called A View from the Bridge. And helpfully, Josh explains what they're talking about. Taylor was referring to a theory that some UFOs seen flying in extraordinary ways are using a kind of warp drive that bends space-time around the alleged craft, freeing it from the effects of gravity and allowing it to travel at extreme speeds without interacting with air or water molecules around it. And then Taylor says there's some sort of physics that we don't understand. So, on Wednesday, I do not expect Sean Kirkpatrick to say anything that will kind of dysregulate anyone. Yeah. The interesting thing is, like, what are the questions, basically, and how kind of clued up are the other senators. Yeah. But Dr. Nolan also spoke about this thing called the structure of scientific revolutions. Now, the structure of scientific revolutions is essentially the scientific version of that thing that Gandhi used to say, right? And Gandhi actually never said it. It was attributed to Gandhi, but it wasn't Gandhi. It was this guy that called Nicholas Klein, who in 1918, he was a unionist and he was delivering a speech to clothing makers of clothes in the States in 1918. And he said, first they ignore you, then they ridicule you, then they attack you and want to burn you, and then they build monuments to you. And that was kind of like changed in a kind of, way that things get changed to Gandhi, who'd never said this, but it's attributed to him. First they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they attack you, then you win. Okay? Now, how does science work? I'm constantly saying that we're very new, we're so naive, we think we've got all the pieces, we don't have any of the pieces. We don't even know what the pieces look like, and we don't know where to find them. We know nothing. This is what I'm constantly saying, yeah? We know nothing. Now, if something comes up that's new, there's a way of science folding it into science, yeah? And that way is called the structure of scientific revolutions. It was kind of written up essentially and kind of like formalized by this guy Thomas Kern. I think I'm pronouncing his surname correctly. Now, there's different phases of this, okay? Phase 1, this is where there's no consensus on any particular theory, but there's different incompatible and incomplete theories out there, okay? So scientific inquiry is in the form of books, and there's no real kind of sense of, kind of like where the meat is, yeah? Nobody can really decide or agree even what to look at, okay? But then there might be a conceptual framework that emerges, and then they might decide on methods and terminology and experiments that you could do that helps with people understanding these theories, okay? And then you've got normal science. So puzzles are solved. This is phase 2. Normal science begins, in which puzzles are solved within the context of the dominant paradigm. As long as there's consensus within the discipline, normal science continues. Over time, progress in normal science may reveal anomalies, facts that are difficult to explain within the context of the existing paradigm. While usually these anomalies are resolved, in some cases they may accumulate to the point where normal science becomes difficult and where weaknesses in the old paradigm are revealed. So in a way, that's where we're at with UAP, yeah? Unidentified anomalous phenomena. They're not acting in a way that we would expect them to act with where we're at with physics, okay? They're kind of breaking the rules, if you like. Okay, then phase 3 comes along. If the paradigm proves chronically unable to account for anomalies, the community enters a crisis period. Crises are often resolved within the context of normal science. However, after significant efforts of normal science within a paradigm fail, science may enter the next phase. Phase 4, paradigm shift, or scientific revolution, is the phase in which the underlying assumptions of the field are re-examined and a new paradigm is established. Phase 5, post-revolution, the new paradigm's dominance is established, and so scientists return to normal science, solving puzzles within this new paradigm. So that's how science shifts forward, okay? There's a particular, pattern of anomalies essentially becoming so overt that you can't ignore them anymore. And then you build ways of working out what could these anomalies be. And you basically go back to the drawing board, okay? So that's what's happening at the moment with UAPs. And it seems absolutely extraordinary, that that's the case. But, what does Kirkpatrick think? Well, in a way, as Nolan said, it's not really about what he thinks, it's just about that he's gathering the data. Now, hopefully, we'll get a bit of transparency, and hopefully we'll get a little bit of an insight into where they're at. But of course, the overwhelming, we don't really need to wait for the government to tell us what's going on, And yet, having said that, the government of the United States and of every other country where listeners are, of course, they do have a role, They have a really important, significant role. They can fund and, throw resources at these things, yeah? And they can kind of provide, information from, observations that go back decades and decades and decades. Now, how much of this is going to be public? Probably not much. Probably the juicy stuff will get, be in the closed hearings. Having said that, it looks like this year we're going to get something that may start a crisis in science. And then we start to see, at some point, a paradigm shift. So, if you like this kind of thing, consider subscribing, will ya? Obviously, I'll be talking about this after Wednesday. Oh, by the way, I've got a treat for you guys, man. Oh, it's such a treat. I'm going to do a report, an on the ground field investigation, a very interesting event that I'm going to with a friend of mine in a couple of weeks' time. So not next week. Next week we'll be talking about the the hearing. Then the week after that, I've got a great report coming up. So very, very good. Thanks ever so much for your time. And episode 53 is on the way, around the corner, as I like to say. Subscribe for consciousness, and see you later.